welcome back, everybody, to the Weekly Intention. I have an absolutely incredible story to share with you all today. I'm really, really excited for this one. If you all want to learn how to fail forward, to develop a serene sense of confidence about yourself, and also just have an overall disruptive form of thinking in terms of business, this will be a great one for you. This man next to me, I've known for about 5 years now, and he's got, honestly, too many accolades to name. When he sent me over his resume, it's 2 pages of just jam-packed things, but some of the things that really stood out to me were that he is a Phoenix Business Journal 40 Under 40 member, one of the finalists for Phoenix Business Journal's top CEOs of the year. He actually was recognized by Forbes as one of the most influential CMOs of the year. He also was one of the first CMOs at GoDaddy, former CEO of Yandy, which was actually acquired by Playboy, and now currently the owner of Queen Beauty Universe, Queen Beauty USA, and CEO of Sky Wellness. This is Thom Brodeur, everybody. Thanks for being here.
Hello, everybody. Good to be with you.
Absolutely. Well, that was quite the intro. That was probably one of the longest ones I've given yet. So
too much job hopping apparently in my career.
You've got a lot of experience in a variety of areas, and I think that's one of the things that stood out to me is all of the things that you do bring to the table, and it's not easy, to make a commanding presence in all of these different areas of business and life. So I do want to get into some of that, but I find that one of the most important things and kind of the key indicators of how this all started is starting out in early life. So would love to talk about young Thom Brodeur before all the accolades, before we ever met each other. Might have even been before I was born. I don't know, but
I can almost guarantee it was before you were born.
Let's take it back there.
Yeah. So I was born in Miami, Florida. My mother and father divorced actually right before I was born. So interestingly enough, I lived in Miami or outside of Miami until I was about 4.5, 5 years old. And then we moved to Northeast Ohio to a very small town that was steeped in the middle of the steel industry. And about 6 years old, I was diagnosed with severe dyslexia, speech impediments, and all kinds of audiology pathology. I had bad ear infections as a kid, and so I couldn't say my S's, I couldn't say my T's, I couldn't say my R's, I couldn't say my W's. I was a train wreck is what I was, and I couldn't really read well. And it was evident when I was in first and second grade, and we had to do out loud reading. And one of my teachers had this gut hunch that there was something that we needed to check into with my doctor. So she called my mom in and she said, look, he's really bright. He's very easy to be around. He's affable with the other kids, but he just freezes up when it comes to reading. And she said, and I think you might want to check into this thing called dyslexia. Now, this was back in 1975, so it wasn't something that was talked about a lot. All kids weren't diagnosed when I was that age with ADHD or some severe learning disorder or anything like that. So it was a little anomalous. So we went to my pediatrician, and oddly enough, walking into his office, I couldn't read from left to right, top to bottom. But if I went into his office, I could read everything backwards from right to left and from bottom to top.
That is crazy.
So we spent about 2.5 years really trying to address that issue with tons and tons and tons of phonics work and a lot of speech pathology and audiology work. And so that was transformative for me because I recognized by 4th grade that I wasn't broken. There was nothing wrong with me. I just had something I had to learn to overcome. And so the learning to overcome skills developed pretty early. And by the time I got to 4th grade and was getting ready to be promoted into 5th grade, all of my teachers were recommending that I skip 5th grade and advance to 6th grade. So I went from learning disability classes in 2nd grade to gifted and talented classes in 5th grade and on. And my mother wisely said, no, we're not going to skip him. He's going to stay. This current course and speed and trajectory of his classwork with his peers. And she felt very strongly that my social circle needed to stay what it was in order for me to excel. And she was worried that if I skipped a grade and I missed any fundamentals, that I would have trouble through the rest of school, and it turns out she was right.
That's so interesting. And before we even go further on that, to be a second grader and have some sort of trauma like that affect your life to where it's like there's something wrong with me, to being able to unpack that and say it's not something wrong with me, it's just a physical, like it's an attribute that I can change. What clicked in your head? Was that your parenting, or was that your mom saying, there's nothing wrong with you? Or how did you connect those dots to say that?
I think for me it was definitely, my mother was a person who didn't graduate from high school. She got her GED 2 years after she should have, went into the military and was a high-ranking official in the United States Air Force and all of that. My mother just believed that we were greater than our circumstances. So she used to tell me all the time, Tommy, you're bigger than this, so go be big. And I just believed that. I didn't know exactly what that meant. I just knew that whatever it was that was in the way was something that could either be overcome or worked around. It wasn't a permanent circumstance. And so I learned that very early, and I think it just was because of the way I was raised.
Your mom sounds like an amazing woman.
She is. She's pretty damn awesome. Yeah.
And I know I saw, because on Veterans Day, I was in the military for 6 years, and I saw you had posted a picture of her in the military as well. So that's very, very cool. And that goes to show you, those socialization ages, like 2nd through 6th grade, when you're figuring out who you are, for her to say that and be reaffirming of you, that's huge, because obviously that started you out of the gates with the right train of thought and the right train of thinking. So I think that's amazing. And now you're at 5th grade. They wanted to skip you, but she was like, no, shouldn't skip you. What happens then?
At a point, I think I was disappointed because I felt at that age, it was like, well, clearly I must be special. I overcame this. So why not get the reward of getting to skip one whole year
being special,
school, right? Just go do that.
Entitlement almost.
It wasn't even entitlement as much as, hey, I climbed that hill. Mm-hmm. Don't I get something for that? And my mother's response, when I said to her, Mom, I don't think that's fair. And she said, I understand that's how you feel now. But when you graduate with the kids you started school with, you'll thank me then. And she was 100% right. And I graduated 7th in my high school class. And I had accomplished a lot academically and athletically in school, and it was because of the support system of that peer group, and that would help me. I think it really defined and shaped for me how important teamwork is, and how I was an only child, so there was the other thing she didn't want to reinforce, which was you can't do everything on your own. You do have to rely on others, and you do have to find ways to build coalition and collaborative relationships in order to get where you want to go. And I think she worried that if I skipped that grade and I sort of got too proud of myself or too full of myself, that I might lose that very important life lesson. And so I'm grateful for sure that it went exactly the way it went.
That's crazy. That made me a little teary-eyed when she said, you'll thank me when you graduate. Wow, that's a great mom through and through. So I think that's amazing. And then the second thing that you said is when you're talking about like the value of collaboration, how many times have you seen when people do get too high on themselves and they act like, I don't need anybody, like I can do this alone, and how well does that work out?
Doesn't.
Not very well.
Not well.
Not well. So she was looking out for you. And those are two massive life lessons to learn early on, the value of collaboration and the value of believing in yourself, essentially.
100%.
So then you finished 7th in your class. I didn't know that you were from Ohio. I'll be honest with you, you're not really an Ohio kind of guy to me. Just like
most people didn't think I was when I was there either.
Yeah, I'm like, people look at me, I'm like this blonde hair. They're like, you're from South Dakota? I'm like, I know it's hard to believe. At one point I was, but it's crazy how people change, and your environment eventually matches who you truly are.
True story.
Was it after college that you had ended up moving down to the Valley?
I did. I was teased a fair amount. I was an academic kid, so because I had overcome so much in grade school and through middle school, by the time I got into junior high school, I was the kid that wouldn't miss school. My mom would be like, let's go play hooky today, because my mother worked nonstop. So I was a latchkey kid from 9 years old on my own, and cooking my own meals and doing my own homework by myself unaided, all that sort of stuff, which is not super normal for kids today. And even I've had that experience with my stepson. So much more reliant on parental input than I was. But I think what was always interesting to me was because I'd overcome all of that, I sort of felt like I needed to be committed to this. Like I was given a second chance to overcome or adapt. And I don't think you ever really overcome something like dyslexia or speech pathology, but you do learn to adapt, and I had overcome it. And so to that degree, I felt like it was important to stay committed academically. So I was kind of a nerdy kid that did, high school newspaper, and then I ran track, so that kind of made me a little bit cool with the athletes in the room, but I wasn't a contact sport kid, so I didn't play football, and basketball I was no good at. So I had this nickname. My phys ed teacher from 5th grade on called me Hollywood. That was the nickname that was given to me, and which was hilarious because I didn't step foot in the state of California until I was 22 years old.
The smart track kid, Hollywood.
So apparently, I don't know how those things go.
To Ohio, you were Hollywood.
Well, I don't know how those things go together, but
they're like, look at these teeth. These are
that might be it. That might have been the smile. Could have been that.
That's funny. Yeah. So I mean, that's really cool that you got involved in sports too, and you took that advice of collaboration after things. And what I'm hearing now is up to this point, you're reinforcing the lessons that you were already taught. Like you had enough awareness to say, these are the things that I overcame early on in life, and if I want to continue to be on this path, I have to, I guess, the fundamentals. Sometimes, like even now, I haven't read a book in like a few months, and I know for me that's been a big part of bringing new ideas to this show, to doing things, and just thinking about new concepts. So yesterday I went on Amazon and I bought 3 new books. I'm like, I have to get back to basics. I have to get back to reading at least once a week and bringing new ideas to the table. So I think that's really cool that you had the foresight to do that at, 20, 21, 22 when people are partying and doing whatever they do.
Yeah, I never really fit that mold. And I think, I guess I just always believed that I was given a gift, which was a degree of intelligence, and I was supposed to do something with it, and I wasn't supposed to waste it or fritter it away or whatever. Now, the flip side of that, Michael, is that you can sometimes learn the bad habit of being so focused on work-related things or whatever that you miss other important things in your life. And I think, when we talk about that failing forward piece, there's a fail forward that you do in your personal life and or your professional life, and they can peacefully coexist, but they can teach you lessons, one lane over the other.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think there's going to be like a lot of degree of failure in life lessons as we unpack some of these different career moves. I mean, especially when you get to the C level, I can't even imagine, some of those lessons. It's lessons to the highest degree, I feel. So I'm excited to hear those in a bit here. And you kind of answered my question. I thought it would from early life about impeccable confidence. That's one of the things that I think you bring to the table, even now, is when you walk into a room, you demand respect. And it's not because like you're forcing respect. It's because that's just who you are. Like I just get that energy about you. Like people respect you. You've got that confidence that you know what you're doing. You have the solution to the problem, even if you might not. Like you're going to figure it out. So I think that's one major takeaway that I want people to have today is understanding, that impeccable confidence. And do you think that is all strictly from those lessons as?
Oh no. Certainly it started there. Well, first of all, that's flattering, and I appreciate that, and it's humbling to hear, because I think anybody who is described as confident, if they're honest with themselves and with your listeners, can say we've had some pretty devastating moments where we felt the least confident ever or capable, and I think for me, I've learned a lot of things through the mistakes that I've made that actually make me confident. And the confidence isn't really about, well, I was good at that, and therefore I always will be good at that. Usually my confidence has come from, wow, I didn't realize that could go so badly. But I lived. I made it through it. And I learned things from it. And so for me, my confidence has always come from falling into the pothole, twisting the ankle, doing the thing the wrong way, and then learning the right way. versus just naturally sort of knowing how to do something and just being good at it. So I was never a gifted athlete. I had to work harder than everybody else. I was not a gifted academic. I had to work harder. And I always knew in the back of my mind, I had these deficiencies that I had to constantly overcome, constantly work around, constantly adapt to. But what that taught me was that that was possible. I could do that part. So I've often said through my whole career, I will never be the smartest person in the room, but it is unlikely you will ever meet someone that will work harder than I will. And so I have confidence in that because I understand my work ethic, and that's really where that confidence comes from. So it's nice to hear it from a different perspective, but that's really where it comes from for me.
That's amazing. So you're almost mixing confidence with failure. You're using your failure to be a form of confidence for you.
Right.
That's such an interesting thing. You know, I think we have a lot of similarities growing up anyways. I ran track too, actually, in school, and I was like an average kid. I was a B student, so I wasn't like a gifted academic, but I know I could have done better. But that was one thing that my dad had always instilled in us, is that if you work hard, like, you can achieve anything.
It's true.
Like, there's no limit to the amount of work that you can do. You have the same 24 hours as everybody else to achieve the same things. What are you going to do with them?
It's a true story. It's a true story. And I think that's really it. It's making the most of the time that you have, making the most of the gifts that you have, and recognizing that that combination is where the confidence comes from. I've met plenty of people. I mean, I've had the privilege, really the privilege of working with people I would describe as geniuses. And that can be some of the most intimidating work that you ever do, particularly if you don't feel that way about yourself. But even Bob Parsons, when I worked with him at GoDaddy, he would say to me, he goes, "You're the guy that will run into the burning building and save people. And those instincts are what I trust about you, Thom. Whether you feel like you have the skill or not, I know you have the wherewithal." And that was huge. I needed that early in my career in order to help me understand how to keep climbing.
That's really where I wanted to take it next. So you read my mind on that. You know, I was reading through your resume and I saw you had a few, jobs before the GoDaddy thing, but really your huge first big title came with GoDaddy. And I mean, now you look at GoDaddy, that's every website domain that is out there. They own the internet basically in a format. So would love to talk about, you said your ability to fail and take charge is what allows you to push forward. How did you position yourself to get into that role at GoDaddy? And then walk us through, what that was like from that point at GoDaddy and some of the trials and tribulations you had, I guess, gone through there.
So, I had worked in an outbound telesales call center environment before I went to GoDaddy, and it was for a technology company. And I had never sold anything, so I didn't really understand how to sell stuff. And so
Sales are hard.
Sales are really hard. And I was never the most gifted salesperson either, but I was just somebody who would just keep doing the work. Again, it goes back to work ethic. And I was recruited to GoDaddy, actually by a woman. I think she still works there. I will never forget her. She's probably one of the most pivotal people in my career. Her name is Barb Rechterman. And Barb became the chief marketing officer. She did a bunch of other things. She was sort of Bob's right hand in the company that he had sold to Intuit before he started what would become Jomax Technologies, and we would later rebrand it as GoDaddy and launch it. She recruited me, and she and Bob were my first and only interview, and it was at a bar.
Really?
Which I thought was really different. Because Bob was a person who connected with people at a personal level, and that's how he made decisions around who would be on his team or whatever. And he said, "Look, we want to offer you the head of marketing position, and understand that's going to be a sales position. It's going to be a direct-to-consumer marketing position. It's going to be a B2B marketing position, et cetera, et cetera. What do you have in your bag of tricks that you understand, can help us?" And I said, "Well, I've never been a marketer." By profession. My degrees are in political science and economics. I thought I was going to go to law school and be a lawyer. I'm really good at reading documents and finding things that are wrong with those. But I think I'm also really, really good at understanding how people think, how consumers behave. And I think maybe those are things that I can I can bring to the table. And I think one of the pivotal moments in my interview was, and I just don't think anybody will work harder than me. And I just spoke my truth, because that's what it was. I didn't feel like I had the skill for the job. I didn't feel like I had the background necessarily for the job. And the job evolved a lot while I was there. So it turns out that the two of them saw me as a bit of a utility player that could do other things if the marketing gig didn't work out. Luckily, the marketing gig worked out. So
there we go. It worked out.
Yeah.
And that's so true about anything. You know, if you expect to go into every great situation hoping that it's going to work out, like, you're going to be SOL half the time. You're going to be let down a lot. But if you go into it with the mindset, which it sounds like you did, that I'm going to do the very best that I can with this opportunity. I've got these skills. I can, transfer some of these skills to do these things, but ultimately ended up working out. And that was your confidence in yourself that you took the shot to begin with.
Yeah.
So
that was the launch, right? That's where it all started. So I have said to Bob for decades now, you and Barb are responsible for my career. And I really do believe that. I mean, I had to do the work, but you also, every human being who's ever been blessed to do anything interesting had to have somebody who believed they could. And he was my start.
That's amazing that you say that. And I'm finding that the habits of successful people, they coincide a lot, whether it's a very, very different story. The last episode that we had done, that was one of the things that he said is believing in yourself before anybody else believes in you. And all it takes is one shot, like that one person to give faith and confidence in you. True. And that can be your launching pad to all of the greatness that life has to offer.
True story.
Yeah.
100%.
I love that. And then from there, I mean, you've been a COO, obviously, of a marketing company that we both worked at for a long time. You killed it there. I thought you killed it there. I loved having you there, by the way.
It was that was a lot of fun. That was, talk about really getting to exercise the muscle of fixing broken things. There was a lot broken because that company had grown so fast in a very short period of time, and the woman who was the founder of it was a real dynamo, but she always came at things from a marketing perspective because that's where she lived in her career prior to that. And I recognized that we just had operational things that really needed to be tightened up, and some things completely eliminated altogether in order for the business to scale and not be under the same kind of pressure that it had been under before. So that was a master's degree in all kinds of things I didn't know how to do either. But I just kind of ran into, this was my leadership team mantra for any of the leaders that ever worked at that company that we worked at together. I would say, okay, there's 3 types of fires. There's white hots, there's red hots, and there's yellow hots. And the white hot ones have old people and babies, and those people are going to die if we don't do something about it. The red hots are the ones where we're going to lose some antiques and some family photos and things that matter to us, maybe memories. And the yellow hots are the ones where the building might just burn, but nothing special or really meaningful is left in it. So it doesn't really matter. So prioritize our issues and let's go at it that way. And that's kind of how I worked there and have worked since.
Based on the hots, based on the hot factor.
Based on the hots. Yeah. If it was white hot, we were on it.
If it was white hot, we got to go now.
We got to do it.
That means go.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And initially why I thought you were a great fit for the show is from day one. That's what I had seen. We were in a period of growth. There was a lot of change. There was things that were happening. And I remember we would go into meetings and you'd be like, this is changing and that's changing and that's changing. And I'm like, what is going on? I was like, this is cool. It's good to be in companies, and it's good to be in a position where you're in something that's growing, where you can exercise, like you said, your creative muscle and be able to make it, your own. There's nothing worse than when you're in a position where it's like set in your ways, and similar to people too, like where you're set in your ways, nothing's changing. People don't want to change because no growth comes from change. No growth comes from lack of change, I should say.
That's right. Well, and I think too, there's one of my favorite books, Michael, I don't know if you've ever read it. It's called Radical Candor. And it is truly one of my favorite books, and I've read dozens of books about business over the years and biographies of important leaders of our time and times before us. But what I love about that book is, and one of the things that I've done my entire career is I've never been a politician. I try to get as much information as I can about all the facets of the stone that I'm looking at, and then just speak with clarity and complete honesty about where we are, where we'll be if we don't do something, where we could be if we do something really interesting. And I think that's was a lost art for a while in my corporate life, where not everybody was wired that way. And radical candor can get you into a lot of trouble when you speak the truth to leadership and to power. But it's one of the cornerstones that I think is really important. And that, I think, comes from, I always felt more confident if I knew I was being truthful. And I always would observe the waverers on leadership teams that were either my peers or parts of companies that I didn't lead. Their lack of confidence came from things they didn't feel that they were truthful about and that they could be honest about. And so sometimes when you are a radically candid person, you wind up not being a cultural fit. That's what happened in the company that you and I were in. I was just way too honest about some things to leadership, and so it was time to go. And that was okay. I was okay with that, and I think probably the organization benefited too from some changes there, honestly.
That's an amazing point, and I want to unpack that because I think that that's huge. Number one is when you talk about being truthful to yourself, like if you're not honest to yourself, and I talked about this again, is that like if you're not honest with yourself, it's always going to come out in one way or another, whether that's lack of confidence, whether that's a lack of ability and execution. So, being able to make the change when you think that something's right and you're listening to your heart when other people don't want to do that, that's a hard place to be in because you're on the boat upstream at that point. You're making changes. Everybody's looking at you because they're like, whoa, this guy's trying to make a change. What's wrong with the way that things are here? And you see that a lot in life now, like with friendships as you elevate your social circles and you say, hey, maybe it's not best that I go out drinking every weekend. Maybe it's not best that I don't go to the gym and I eat potato chips every day. And you start to change, facets of who you are. And as you do that, people will, come at you like, what happened, Michael? What happened, Tom? You've changed, as if that's a bad thing.
It's true. And I think, part of, one of the keys just to living a good life is getting to the center of your purpose, of who you are, what you're about, what you're meant to do, and being honest about that, being radically candid with yourself and with others in your circle. And what you'll find at times is you shed things, you lose things, but you always gain things. And I've often, described my own life, my personal life and my professional life. There are times where I go through these very ugly pruning experiences, right? And if you've ever looked at a rose bush or a tree that's gone through pruning, they're not super attractive when you scale back. You start trimming off the dead and the old and sometimes even some fresh stems that just aren't growing the right way. But when you give it time after that and you watch it bloom in the next cycle, it's always a fuller experience. It's always a better experience, and it's always stronger. And so you have to be willing to go through those ugly haircuts, I call them, to get to the better outcome. Yeah, and I think the kind of work that you do, Michael, with this podcast and others do, I think it's really important to sort of demystify and take the fantasy out of what does it take to become the person you're interviewing. We're all human. We all have insecurities. We all have mountains to climb every day. And I think when you're able to really sort of get to the basics of who the human being is, and you let them unpack the things that they're not great at, plus the things that they've learned to be good at, plus the things they're just discovering. I mean, at 51 years old, running a CBD company, I'm learning things that I just had absolutely no idea I had the capacity to know, or the skill to, or even the will to learn. But I think, strategic humility through your career is really important, and understanding when to truly sort of collect information from other places and then layer that against what your gut tells you. And I've always been a gut leader who looks for the math and the science and the data that disproves why I feel the way that I feel, instead of, and that's probably what made me a successful marketer. I was never the guy that was out looking for the information that would verify my decision. I would tell my team, go find all the reasons this is broken, a dumb idea, not the right direction. I want to know that because I already know how I feel and what I think this is supposed to be. I don't need you to validate that. I need you to tell me what could be broken, where we could fall into a trap door and really hurt ourselves. And I think that kind of humility is really important to exercise as you grow your career, because if you lack it, you'll learn lessons a harder way than you need to.
You will. I've learned a little bit of that already. Not too huge. I'm glad I learned it early, because now I know I'm like, don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't be that guy.
Yeah.
Because you make a little money in your 20s in sales, and you think all of a sudden you're the best, and then you realize, oh wait, things go up and down. And I think I want to take this step back, and then I want to take a step forward. But one of the things that you talk about, with courage and being disruptive, I think another piece of confidence is high energy. So you're speaking your truth, but you're also doing it with conviction and energy. How do you even put that into words, how you maintain high energy when you're going upstream against things that people might not want to, converse about, might not want to talk about, but you're bringing, that high energy and that confidence and that focus, letting people know that things are going to be okay?
Yeah, wow. That's a loaded question.
That's a big one, right?
It is a big one. I don't know. I can just relate it to me. Change is never comfortable for anyone. Even people who embrace change usually are not comfortable going through it. And I feel that when you're introducing change, whether they're small incremental changes, evolutionary changes, or big sweeping revolutionary changes, you really do have to believe that your conviction is the right thing, because that's where you do sell. And you have to sell the idea, and sometimes you have to resell it over and over again. And I learned very early in my career that just because I said it once or even twice didn't make it so, because it doesn't land the way that it needs to until sometimes you repeat a thing half a dozen times, and you repeat it half a dozen different ways. It's the same premise, but the confidence comes from in the early stages when you're selling an idea or you're driving change into an organization. People gain confidence from two things, I think. One is they believe in the messenger. They believe that he or she is capable of seeing them through that change. So even if they don't have confidence in, well, I'm not sure how this is going to happen, or how we're going to get it done, or are we going to get it done on time or under budget, or all those things. If the leader feels, seems, and conveys confidence, then they'll come along. The second thing, though, is honesty and transparency. And I think you had this experience where we worked together. If I was concerned that it was going to take more time, it was going to be hard, there were going to be challenges that we might not know about going into the eye of the storm, I would talk about those. Because I also think that people do better with certainty that no matter what happens, we will find our way. And so if you can help people understand that failure is something that we'll share together and they won't be exclusively and solely responsible for, and victory we'll share together, something they won't be solely and exclusively responsible for, and that you won't take credit for. If they've done the work, that's really hallmark leadership. It's really important to do.
The team, really making people be invested and feel like they're a part of something.
100%.
Everybody wants to be a part of something, whether that's a job or, a gym group. I hear that constantly. Actually, last night I was having a conversation. I asked a girl, I was like, why do you like this place so much? And she was like, it's because of the community. I don't get the sense of community anywhere else I can go. So if you can provide somebody a sense of community where they feel welcome, valued, respected, like we're a team, I think that's the outcome of.
I think it's true.
I think that's true too. I think we're onto something.
Yeah.
So certainty is the result of a belief in the plan.
And a belief that even if the plan doesn't go exactly as you think it should, and exactly as you've mapped it out, you will get there. If the flag's been planted and you know where you're headed, you might zig, you might zag, and that might be the best thing for you. Straight line might not be the right way, but As long as your eye is fixed on what the end goal is and the outcome is, and you understand that everybody knows they're headed that direction, there's a fair amount of confidence that comes from the certainty that even if we zig or we zag, we're still going to get where we need to go. Even if we turn left at the fork in the road and head a mile what appears to be the wrong direction, so we can find the path back the right direction, we'll still find it. And I think that's important.
I think that's a great point, and I think that ties back to abundance mindset. You know, when you're in scarcity mindset and everything's lack, like how are we going to get there? How are we going to do this and not that? And I think now that I'm seeing and talking to you, that comes from lack of execution, lack of preparation. So like if you're not prepared, you're not ready, you don't feel confident in the plan because you haven't prepared in the plan, and now you're not certain. So you're certain in the plan because you've made the plan, and because of all the preparation that you've done, you're confident in your team and what's going on. Eventually you're going to get there regardless of the short-term outcome.
I mean, I think that's true of pretty much anything, right? Mm-hmm. If you ran track, you said, when you were in school. I mean, you had to have a coach that would tell you, look, that lap sucked. Your time was bad. Put these ankle weights on and high tops. Now go run it again. Now when you take the ankle weights off and you take the high tops off, you can run faster. Isn't that weird? Isn't that strange? And you look at those moments and you think, wow, that's draconian. That's exhausting. I don't want to do that. But it turns out it makes you stronger and it helps you get where you need to go. So
whenever we would do, like when we would have a bad meet, we would do something that was like, there's a ladder. So we'd go out and we'd run the 100, then we'd run the 200, then we'd run the 300, and then the 400 and the back down. But they were all out sprints. Ugh. And every one, he was like, that time was crap. Like, like they're just like going after you, because I'm like, yeah, I'm gassed. And by the time you get to the 400, I'm like, I don't want to go back down now. That 200 feels like a lot further than a 200 does. But true. you feel, I mean, you got to be honest with yourself. If you're not doing well, you have to have some sort of awareness. You know, there's nothing worse than, I mean, failing and then not owning up to it, not being truthful with yourself, because there's nothing good that's going to come from that.
Well, and I think, you keyed in on something that's interesting about this idea of abundance versus scarcity mindset. I've always been a person who believes in a path to yes, and it's how I lead. Sure, there are going to be obstacles. We should expect that. Sure, there are going to be things that we don't plan for. Sure, there are going to be things that we planned to go a certain way, and they're winding up that they'll go a different way. Plan for all of that. But the path is to yes. It's to how it gets done, not whether it gets done, not even when it gets done, but how it gets done, and that it gets done. And so there would be times where I would have leadership. I still have them, where I have leadership team meetings, and you always have somebody on your team who's a stop sign thrower. But here are the 5 reasons why that's not going to work. Let me tell you why. And I'll give that all the oxygen that it needs, and then I'll look at that person and say, great. Now your task is to find out how we get there. So now you know all the reasons why we can't get there based on the path you've just outlined. So how do we get there? And you find that it starts to change people's perspective and even the way that they operate in their own personal lives, because you just refuse to allow the stop sign to stop you. I think it's critical. It
is critical. And they actually have a name for that. It's called your reticular activating system. And it's like the lens that you see life through. I've learned this through a different podcast. I can't take full credit for it.
That's awesome.
That's a big word.
It's a lot of words.
Yeah, it's a lot of words. But essentially what it does is it, like, whatever your brain is trained to see, like if you focus on the problems and you see the problems, all you're going to see is problems. Whereas somebody who is in the same position, could even be same role, same place, same everything, they're choosing to see how that changes the entire outcome. There was no difference between those two people. They had the same exact opportunity, the same place, at the same time, but the way that they chose to view that situation, you with how are we going to get there? That person gets there.
Right, 100%. I mean, and look, where we work together, one of the things that I really appreciated about the person that I reported to was she was very big on what she described as option thinking. Be an option thinker. Think about another way. Because the way I'm telling you may not be the way. The way we all collectively in this room right now are nodding our heads to and paying homage to may not be the way. So let's think about other ways. Let's be option thinkers. And so to me, that's the same thing as that path to yes.
That path to yes.
Yeah.
I like that. The path to yes.
Well, for me, I had to from the time I was in second grade. I had to find a way. I was like, okay, I have all these years of school left. If I can't read correctly, how am I going to do that? How is that going to affect my ability to do math? How is that going to affect my ability to write papers? How is that going to affect my way of getting into college? I had the presence of mind at 9 years old to understand if I don't figure out how to do something here, there's a whole lot of years ahead of me where I'm going to be dragging that baggage with me. I don't want to do that. That's more work than I want to do. I'd rather do the other work and find a way.
Deal with it now or deal with it later.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And I think I'll call this one Find a Way. That's a good title, right?
Cool.
Let's find a way.
Cool.
So that's awesome. I really am glad we broke down the confidence and the high energy piece, because I think you're not going anywhere without either of those two things. I mean, that's critical to gaining leadership and having people believe in you. If you don't believe in yourself, other people aren't going to believe in you either. So that's really, really awesome. I know a big piece of what we talked about before this is that failures have shaped you. And, we've already talked about how the failures worked in relationship with confidence, that because of this failure and you overcame it, that's kind of how you gain your confidence, which is a great way to, I guess, see it. But everybody, especially in your career, has a few pivotal moments where, whether it was the dyslexia as a child, I'm really curious in your professional career, what were some of those giant moments of failure and pivoting in life that people could gain insight from to understand, this is what failure at a high level looks like, and this is how somebody would get over that?
Well, it wasn't that long ago. Just 3 years ago, 4 years ago, I had been recruited for almost a year to become the CEO of Yandy.com. And I was finally in a place where I had been chief operating officer, chief marketing officer, chief operating officer, executive vice president of venture development, senior vice president of global strategy and corporate development. I had been all the things. I'd done all the things. I played all the roles, and it was my turn.
You did all the steps and you're ready.
I'm ready to go do that C-suite thing where I get to captain the ship and I get to make things happen. Still have to work with a team, of course, to make those things happen, but I get to put vision into something where I get to own the outcome. And I thought I took, Michael, all the right steps. Prior to accepting the job, I put together a strategic plan. It was a 3-year turnaround plan because the company was in trouble. It needed to be turned around. It was sitting on a throne of declining fortunes when it should have been going the other direction. And so I put the strategic plan together and this turnaround plan and budget and all the rest together, and had the board of directors sign off on it before I accepted the position. So I thought, smart. I have it figured out, right?
Before you get into this, I want to tell everybody, this was the official swimwear of the 2017, some massive pageant, right?
Miss USA.
Miss USA. This was the swimwear of Miss USA in 2017.
Yeah, and the company was a great company, and it had really good bones and solid fundamentals, but it had grown up in the digital age as an e-commerce leader because it was able to do a lot of really inexpensive SEO that drove consumer behavior. But it also was positioned in a market segment that was so niche that it was missing a much bigger market opportunity. And so this board said, look, you're that guy that knows how to do that and do those things, knows how to expand into markets we're not in and all the rest. And so they signed off on my plan, and we were, I will call it, 9 months pregnant with my plan. We were ahead of the game on a couple of our key performance indicators, and we were behind on one. And the board, I think, got nervous because we were transforming the business in real time. We were running a company that had to perform at a certain revenue, gross margin, and net income or EBITDA level without losing much more steam that it already had, while creating this market presence for a mass consumer that we had never talked to really before. So moving out of niche into mass. And I upended the leadership team. I brought in some talent that was very aggressive, that had done some very big things.
Disruptive thinkers.
It was disruptive thinking, and And the board got nervous, and so did some of the members of the leadership team that I inherited, and felt like, wait, what if this doesn't go well? What if? So confidence became an issue past us starting to execute the plan. Mm-hmm. And so I was asked in a board meeting if I would make a specific decision around a certain kind of strategic marketing effort. And it just, it flew in the face of my moral compass. And I said, no, I'm not the guy to run this place if that's what you expect me to do. And the chairman of the board, or the ad hoc chairman of the board, at the end of the meeting came to me and he said, this was a really contentious and tough board meeting. Well, they didn't have board meetings before I got there. We had 5 of them in the year that I was there, because we had some really fundamental things that we had to fix. And he said, but you're the guy. You're the right guy to lead us through this. I understand why you feel the way that you feel. And I said, look, I never told you it was going to be easy, but I told you if you give me 3 years and you allow me some flexibility within these key performance indicators, we'll get there, and we're already ahead on 2 of our 3. The third one, it's going to take a little time to catch up. The long story short is about 6 days later, they came in and said, Thom, we're going to go a different direction. So I was relieved of my role as the CEO, and other leaders that I brought into the company were all relieved also. So they basically put on blast the management team. And it was an indictment. To me, I took it very personally, Michael. It was an indictment of but I did all the right things. I got you to sign off on this before I started, right? And we were making really good progress. But we weren't making all the progress. And of course we wouldn't have inside of the first year. But there was an appetite for something different. And oddly enough, about 12 months ago, not 12 months ago, about 10 months ago, one of my board member sponsors from that company called me, and he said, I want to tell you what's going on with the business. Because after I left E&D, I tried to buy it. Because I thought, well, you know what? If I can't run it with you people in charge, I'm going to bring in a private equity firm that buys you out so I can go do what I think is the right thing to do with the business. And they rejected both of our offers, and then they wound up getting a materially less offer from Playboy, which I thought was really interesting because Playboy was a deal that I said no to also. So I said no to that and another thing. And ultimately, that board prevailed in that they sold the company to Playboy, and they sold it for a fraction of what I offered for it. So, now they get to figure out how to make that work. But it was a huge failure to me. I felt like, wait, my first job as CEO, I spent all these years doing the right things, being the best number 2, the best number 3 behind, some people who were definitely smarter than me and I learned a lot from, and other people who weren't. And so I took it really hard, and I went through about 6 months of what I would describe to you as a deep professional clinical depression, really just questioning, like, am I not as good at things as I thought I was? Am I not good at hearing? What did I miss? Is my intuition of around people, was it that off? How could I have missed the boat? So when I got this call, what would have been 2 years later, and he said, you did everything right, and your plan was exactly right. We just couldn't sign off on it because, and he disclosed to me a material financial fact in the business that I had no visibility into or exposure to because it was held with the private equity firm and not in our financials. That's what caused me to be released from the job. So crazy, you get the hindsight's 20/20, right? It's like,
the story is absolutely wild.
It's like breaking up with an ex, and they come to you all the years later and go, "You were the love of my life, and
you were the one
that I did it, right?"
And I was wrong, and that's
right.
That's absolutely nuts in the fact that, one, you had the job you always wanted. You were the CEO. You had all these other jobs. You've been working 20 years being strategic in marketing and operations and all these things. You got the job. You're doing your thing. You're pumped up. You're like 8 months in. They're like, let's do this thing that we don't think that you won't agree with. Like, it doesn't align with your moral character. And you said, no, I have to do what's in congruence with who I am. And then they let you go for it, and then you ended up being right. What a wild roller coaster of a time.
And you're like, okay, so what was the lesson? And I think for me, the lesson was 2 things. It was good for me to kind of go inward. It was good for me to spend time really picking apart what could I have done better. How could I have communicated it better? How could I have created more confidence? How could I have created or instilled enough confidence that maybe they would have made a different decision? The truth of the matter is they couldn't legally make a different decision. Well, I didn't know that. So, having that gating factor was knowledge of that gating factor after the fact was great to know. But I needed to do all that inspection. And then I needed to learn a different lesson. And that was, am I as a human being only the sum of my accomplishments? So I was shaken to my core at 49 years old that I was supposed to learn a lesson about who I am as a human being, because my entire life had been accolade, achieve, hard work, accolade. And I sort of forgot in all of that, well, who am I? Am I just the stack of 40 under 40s and nominations for things I had no business being nominated for and all that kind of stuff? What is that? So I needed to learn a lesson, and I had to be shaken to my core as a human being, not as a professional or a working person, but just as a human, that I was on the wrong ball. That really was it.
I don't even know what to say there. I didn't even know it was going in this direction. Yeah. And that's amazing. I mean, you think about your whole life and everything that you've accomplished and everything that you're chasing. And I feel that to some extent too. You are always chasing this new thing, this what's next. And you get all of your accomplishment and your wholeness as a human being from that achievement. Well, if that achievement isn't there, and sometimes like we've seen in this year, like I've felt that way for the middle of the year. I spent 4 months unemployed, applying to hundreds of jobs, working out like twice a day, because I'm very similar in the mindset that like, if I'm not doing something that is worth something, then what am I? And I actually figured this out last week. It hit me like a hurricane in the brain. I was like, just because somebody else is doing good, that does not mean that I'm doing bad.
That's right. It's 100% true, right? And I had people in my life that were like, what is wrong with you? Well, why are you like this? And my answer was, something's changing at a cellular level for me. I am tuning into something that is totally different than anything I've ever tuned into before, and that is my self-worth is not wrapped up in a net worth or in any other kind of thing. It's just not. It shouldn't ever have been. But sometimes the thing you wish for the most, if you grab the brass ring and you pop it into your nose and somebody yanks it back out, it smarts, it hurts, and you have to examine why that is.
You've always found a way. I mean, from young age, overcoming dyslexia to track to your career, and even this is a version of finding your way. And I think that our preparation for moments is taking us where we need to go. The larger the preparation, the larger the hardships, the larger the purpose, and the larger the drive, in the end of it. So I think you're seeing a whole different, viewpoint and vision of your life that all of these things has prepared you for. So whether it's the final destination or not, all those things prepared you for who you are right now.
It's a true story. And I think that's going back to your comments even before we came on air about finding purpose. And I think what it all boils down to for me is I'm really, really good at helping other people see the path to yes. And when I went back to that from a very basic mind frame perspective, that's when Sky Wellness kind of landed in my lap. And it was just, I couldn't spell CBD. I had no idea, honestly. And I had, outside of Yandy, had not been in consumer packaged goods at all. I'd been in B2B and B2C technology most of my career. And so when I just sort of zoomed back into, well, what's the point? What am I good at? What can I bring to the table? Well, I'm good at building things, and people are what I'm best at building. That's really it.
If someone were to walk up to you today, total stranger, and said, hey, Thom, nice to meet you, and they just asked you, are you happy? What would you say?
I would say I am now. But it took a while, for sure, because I had to get to an authentic, happy place. I had to be happy about what makes me me versus what I can do or how good I am at that. being a good human, that's a worthwhile thing. It's really the most worthwhile thing.
Wow. Tearing up on this show. That hits me hard. That's why I love doing these. You never know where they're going to go. I find a couple of things about you that I think that you've done well, and it always transforms into something totally different. And then we always figure out what is the core of you. And now I feel like I have a whole different understanding for you. And I feel like people are getting a lot from this. I mean, you got to watch this one. You have to watch this one. We're definitely going to spread this around so people see it. But we call this the weekly intention, and you've covered so many different points. And my whole premise for the show is, this is the weekly intention. So I want to give people conscious intentions that they can set forward today, where they say, hey, I listened to this interview. This is one thing I can take and run with right now to improve the quality of my life in whatever regard that might be. If you had like one piece of advice or one intention that somebody could say, hey, this is something that I can change right now to make an impact in my life, what do you think that would be based on the sum of your accomplishments in life?
You should always expect the best out of yourself. But the best path to that is to expect the best for yourself. Because you have to have good coming in order to have great going out. So you should expect the best for yourself so that you can expect the best of yourself. And I think it's really important. And nobody ever gets anywhere. I don't care what self-made person ever tells you, I'm self-made. It's never the truth. It's the biggest lie there is. You never get there without standing on the shoulders of somebody, borrowing somebody else's binoculars so you can see far enough ahead to figure out where you want to go. It's just the way life works. And you got to be okay with that too.
Wow. That's good. I've never heard it phrased that way ever. And that's something I'm going to look back to and listen to myself, just so I can really feel it from a third party perspective, because I'm here right now. But this has been amazing. I really appreciate you jumping on. Make sure you guys like, share, subscribe, comment. If you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe to my channels. I've got all my interviews that I posted there. I put this on Instagram, and I really do this for you guys. So share this and make sure that people see it, so that way they can get insights from this too. And then Thom, I want to plug your business or wherever you want people to find you, whether that's your Sky Wellness brand or your personal, whatever you want to.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're living in some pretty crazy times, right? Unprecedented things are happening all around the world, and certainly in our country. And I think this last, 9 to 10, 11 months has taught me a great deal about, managing stress. One of the best things I've learned in the CBD business that I've been in for 18 months is you can get a lot of stress relief from taking things that are good for you, good for your body. So if you want to visit skywellness.com and check things out there, feel free to do so. There's lots of good stuff for relaxation and anti-anxiety and calm, and sort of giving you some restful moments in your life, particularly when we think about all the stress that folks are under now.
Yeah, I hope for that too. After this year, it's been crazy and it's been a whirlwind, but I think everything that you said is very true. We're going to get to where we need to go eventually.
Yeah.
And this year has exposed a lot of truth to all of us. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it a lot. I think people are going to get a lot from this. And this is Michael with the Weekly Intention. Take care, everybody.